Great. Oh. All right, there we go. So I slightly edited my presentation and added a little field notes towards ... to make it more of a presentation of some notes than a presentation of any kind of argument. But as Adam said, I have been researching waves. And at first, I guess I wanted to start with some of the material that I generated and the different kinds of waves that I've been encountering. I think this is going to be really loud, but yes, there are many different kinds of waves, beautiful and serene ones, and choppy and windy ones. Here's a little study of a wave breaking by me. Here are some waves generated on a puddle. Very windy day on the island. And here are some wave patterns left in sand. One thing that I also wanted to share about researching waves is that it can be quite uncomfortable, especially when you're experiencing them. I spent quite some time being really seasick. Watching this video still makes me a little bit seasick. This is on a boat towards a Fingal's cave, which we couldn't see in the end because the waves were too big. Was the first boat tour of the year or something to the cave. But so besides, I guess, my personal encounters with waves, as Adam already said, I'm very interested in wave energy converters and the marine energy sector. And a few specific wave energy converters that I've been interested in Scotland are firstly the sea clam, which has been tested on Loch Ness in the 80s, I believe, quite a while ago. But then a little bit more recently, the oyster wave converter, which has been tested at the European Marine Energy Center in Orkney, and also the limpets, which used to be a grid-connected wave energy converter on the island of Islay. I guess what I'd hoped for, one of the things that I hope for my fieldwork, both or like in Scotland, was to actually see a wave energy converter myself. As you can see, I spent quite some time standing on the coast looking through my binoculars and finding energy converters on all kinds of marine traffic maps, but they're far away from the coast, and most of them are set up as experiments. So that means that either they are, the experiment didn't happen at the same moment in time that I was in a certain area, or they're just far out at sea and you need a boat to go see them, and that was a little bit beyond, I guess, my resources. So when I found in The Instant, a novel by Orcadian author Amy Littrett, that a reference to her seeing the wave energy devices bobbing on the sea, that made me quite frustrated because I was like, how did you see them then? I can't see them. But maybe she was lucky and there was some onshore experiment going on at the moment. So this is what I saw through my binoculars most of the time. Waves, the wave energy converters. But I did manage to see one on shore. Someone informed me that the Orkney or the Stromness dump site often has used, or like, I guess, discarded wave energy converters or other kinds of marine energy experiments. And so in that way, I could take a little, really, like, I guess mostly a picture of grass, but it's supposed to be a selfie of me and a wave energy converter. I also had one taken by a woman with a dog, but that was walking her dog, and that was even worse. And I was really happy with this. I just wanted to, go see the structure of something like this and the size. And for me, it was a really important experience, nevertheless. what I did manage to see was all the on-site infrastructure that's involved in marine energy generation, especially on Orkney. I saw all the big cabling that that enters the shore, and all the electronic equipment required for converting energy and then rerouting it. So that is very, very visible in comparison, I guess, to the devices themselves, and somewhat more easily encounterable, even though you have to know where to go, of course. Wave energy devices, not so accessible to me. Waves, pretty accessible to me. But in my research on waves and wave energy, both in, I guess, industries, but also in art, I encountered loads and loads of spirals and shells. And as you might have noticed just earlier, the 3 wave energy converters that I was interested in Scotland are all named after different shellfish: limpets, oysters, and clams. And this is a poetry collection by 2 UK poets who spent some time in a residency at the Marine Energy of the Orkney Marine Energy Center. And here you can see it's full of shellfish. And while I was, so I did 2 major fieldwork trips during my time in Scotland, one on the island Orkney in the north, and one on the Isle of Mull with Creative Research Centre Knockvolligan, run by Dutch author Miek Swamborn, who wrote a fantastic book on seaweed and cultures of seaweed. And being interested in this figure of the shell, I guess across as well as a way of, I guess, imagining or figuring the future of marine energy, made it a lot more easy for me to go out and do field work, because I could just go out and encounter a whole load of shells along the Scottish coast. So I spent quite some time, especially with Miek, identifying and encountering loads and loads of shellfish along the coast. Miek, at the end of my stay, gave me this beautiful little shell called a fake cowrie, which I will come back to in a bit. But what I find very interesting about shells in general is that they cross art and science very, very clearly, in the sense that I have these 4 images here. On the right, you see 2 images, one from the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and one from the Hunterian. The shells, the colorful shells on the bottom are part of a culture exhibit, and the shells on the top are part of a nature exhibit. They're supposed to indicate species. And if you look at these 2 more biological illustrations on the left of the screen in black and white, you can see that the one on the right is, I guess, also a biological overview or a scientific overview, while the one on the left is it's an artistic presentation, I guess. And what else interests me a lot about shells, and that is also related to Miek's fake cowrie, is that shells played a very big role in transatlantic slavery. They were used as money to buy enslaved peoples. And they also played a big role, I guess, in early modern European society, in terms of that they functioned as cultural capital. So owning shells as art was very important to, for example, the guy on my presentation who's holding a shell on his portrait and having a whole bunch of shells on his lap. This is a Dutch merchant. And what else interests me about the figure of the shell as, you know, a way of imagining future marine energy economies is that shells have been used in the past also as ways of imagining economies and thinking about economies. And then especially, for example, in the early 20th century, when eugenicist biological thinking was replaced by more indirect racist economical thinking, which is thinking about populations and the idea that there can be too many of a certain kind of people often. What I encountered in my some of my research, or what I'm really interested in, is the imagination of the wave and the curve, or growth and decline. The biologist Raymond Pearl used a population of flies to think about, like, if there are universal economic rules for how big a population can get, and especially the biologist Darcy Wentworth Thompson, which you can see on the picture here as well, thought that was very important for thinking about populations. And he again linked that also to the logarithmic spiral. So these ideas of like finding some kind of universal formula for how nature and economies are supposed to work. So these are kind of ways of naturalizing politics, basically. And then finally, shell, the obvious, I guess, figure of the shell in terms of energy. So what I wanted to say was that maybe the last few illustrations that I gave are illustrations of shells or figures of shells that we might not want to be repeating, you know, in marine energy futures. But there's also figures of shells that we do maybe want to pay more attention to, or of spirals. And one thing that I wanted to show before I say that is that waves themselves are spirals, actually. If you trace the movement of matter in a wave, you get these really beautiful spiral graphs. And I think that, for example, spiral shapes in nature, or logarithmic spirals in nature, help us think about possibilities that are unrealized and that could be realized potentially. This is a graph of potential energy and all potential shell forms that could ever exist in nature, of which not all of them have been realized, of course. This is Scottish artist Hannah Imlach's work Nautilus Turbine, which is based on the spiral form or logarithmic spiral, and is kind of intended as a personal, so decentralized water energy converter. And I also think that the spiral helps us think about other ways of knowing, so different kinds of epistemologies. For example, Fanny Howe describes spiral thinking or a spiral walker as, I guess, never really reaching a conclusion, but always being estranged even by the familiar. I would say that the observation that shells accumulate rather than grow is also really important for what I think the epistemological, or like the thinking with what thinking with shells could look like, which is that, which is also kind of like this presentation. It's and there's no, I don't really want to. Well, I'll just leave it at that. I'm trying to finish very, very quickly. And finally, I think that shells and spirals help us think about capture, letting go, permanence and impermanence. And that's also, I guess, the ways that we are attached to certain kinds of imaginaries of the future, or certain kinds of relationships to environments. And related to that, I have a poem to close with, so I won't have the final word myself. This is Jan Hadfield's, who is a Scottish poet, Limpet, and it only takes like a minute or something. So.
Limpet. Stop now you're home and consider what that feels like. Don't stop. Continue to whirl like an introvert tornado across the flooded rock pool in an ease of gypsy skirts, cyclonic, high and wet. This is not a thing to sit tight upon, locked to your home scar against the migraine of the waves. This rebate will wait that you can spin home to like cup to saucer, matching every chip in your shell to its own rocky rostrum. Clamp down, turn the key of yourself in the lock of yourself. Fasten with 100 infinitesimal mortices.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.